The conference room smelled of lemon polish, expensive leather, and the sharp, clean scent of betrayal. It was a smell June Sterling had become intimately familiar with over the last 3 years. But today, it had a final, metallic tang. Across the 20 feet of polished mahogany, Richard Sterling, soon to be Richard Thorne again, scratched his signature with a flourish. The Mont Blanc pen, a gift from her on their 5th anniversary, moved with a confidence that made June's jaw tighten imperceptibly. "And that's the last one," Richard said, capping the pen and slipping it into the breast pocket of his Tom Ford suit. A suit bought with her money. Everything about him was bought with her money. Freedom never felt so bureaucratic. His lawyer, a sleek man named Arthur Finch, gave a practiced, neutral smile. Just the standard post-nuptial dissolution. "Richard, the state of California requires its paperwork." He gathered the thick stack, tapping it neatly on the table. "The judge will enter the final decree this afternoon. The 30-day review period for the asset division schedule will commence then." June's lawyer, Eleanor Vance, didn't smile. Her steel grey bob was a helmet, her eyes like chips of flint behind rimless glasses. "The schedule is non-negotiable. As per the pre-existing marital agreement, any attempt to litigate the division outside of the agreed framework will be viewed as bad faith and will trigger the penalty clauses." Richard waved a dismissive hand, his eyes already drifting to the smartphone face-up on the table beside him. It lit up with a notification, a pink heart emoji, visible to everyone in the room. Yes, Eleanor. We've all read the fine print. 30 days. A month. An eternity. He finally looked at June. And the mask of casual arrogance slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing something colder, hungrier. "You get to keep the mausoleum on Broadway. I hope the silence suits you." June met his gaze, her own hands folded calmly on the table. Her simple diamond wedding band, a modest thing from her grandmother, the only jewelry she'd insisted on wearing today, felt like a lead weight. "I've always appreciated quiet, Richard. It allows one to think clearly." He barked a short, humorless laugh. "Think all you want, June. The thinking is done. The doing begins now." He pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping on the hardwood. "If we're finished with the theater, we are," Eleanor said, her voice cutting. "My client has no further business with you today." "Perfect." Richard stood, adjusting his cuffs. He didn't look at June again. "Finch, send the paperwork to my new address. The one on Filbert Street." He said the address with a deliberate, smug emphasis. It was in Pacific Heights, one of the most exclusive, most expensive streets in San Francisco. A street where she had grown up, and where he had never belonged. He was out the door without a backward glance, his footsteps echoing down the hall of the prestigious Vance Crowe offices. The room was silent for a long moment. Arthur Finch cleared his throat, avoiding June's eyes as he packed his briefcase. "A clean break, June. It's for the best." He scurried out, a rat leaving a sinking ship that had, in reality, already been scuttled by its captain. Eleanor waited for the door to click shut. Then she let out a slow breath. "He's a fool. An arrogant, preening fool. He's a thief," June corrected, her voice quiet but unwavering. She unclasped her hands, noticing they were trembling. She willed them to stop. "And he believes he's gotten away with it." Eleanor's lips thinned. "The 30-day review period is a vulnerability. He could cause trouble. File motions. Drag it out. He's spiteful enough. He'll be distracted," June said, standing and walking to the floor-to-ceiling window. 40 stories below, the financial district of San Francisco teemed with ant-like life. She found the black town car idling at the curb. The rear door opened, and Richard slid in. A moment later, the other door opened, and a slim figure in a cream-colored trench coat, with a flash of long blonde hair, ducked inside. "Samantha." The car pulled away, merging into the traffic on Montgomery Street. "He's with her now," June stated. A simple fact. Eleanor came to stand beside her. "Do you want to initiate phase 1? Now?" June watched the car until it disappeared from view. A memory, sharp and unbidden, sliced through her composure. 3 years ago. Richard's home office. He'd left his email open on the shared desktop, rushing to a critical investor dinner. A dinner he told her was men only. The subject line caught her eye. R.S.V.P. Bliss. It was from Samantha Lowell, his executive assistant. The body was brief. The suite is booked. Can't wait to see you there. P.S. The champagne you like is already on ice. Her heart had been a cold, hard stone in her chest. She'd clicked view entire conversation. The thread went back months. Flirtation. Innuendo. Then, explicit planning. A weekend at the Post Ranch Inn in Big Sur. References to distracting June with spa days. A joke about the old money not knowing how the new money plays. She hadn't confronted him. Confrontation was for people who had something to gain, or something to lose that they couldn't afford to. Instead, she'd closed the browser, walked to her own study, and made 2 calls. The first was to Eleanor Vance. The second was to a discreet, exquisitely expensive private investigation firm recommended by her family's head of security. The investigation had yielded more than an affair. It had uncovered a spiderweb of financial deceit, funneled funds from her holding company, June Holdings LLC, into shell corporations, inflated invoices to contractors who didn't exist, loans taken against her assets, with her forged signature. Richard wasn't just cheating on his wife, he was systematically looting her inheritance. The Sterling family fortune built over 4 generations in shipping, railroads, and, more recently, tech venture capital. He'd married June Sterling, the quiet, bookish heiress, thinking he'd found a beautiful, pliable vault. He'd mistaken her reserve for stupidity, her kindness for weakness. June. Eleanor prompted gently. June blinked, the past receding. The cold fury that had sustained her for 3 years was now a focused, humming energy. She reached into her purse, not for a compact or lipstick, but for a sleek, matte black phone with no visible brand. A satellite phone. Encrypted. Untraceable. She typed a single, pre-drafted code and hit send. Phoenix Protocol. Initiate sequence alpha. Timestamp, 14:07 PST. AUTH, JS Omega. The message vanished into the ether. It's done, June said, turning from the window. The San Francisco skyline, her city, spread out before her. The review period is irrelevant. He won't have access to anything to litigate with by nightfall. Eleanor allowed herself a small, grim smile. The board, Michael is standing by. The emergency meeting is convened for 4 p.m. The votes are secured. And the physical assets, a repossession team is already en route to the locations of the LaFerrari, the Bugatti, and the vintage Aston Martin. The cards will be declined on his next attempted transaction. June picked up her own classic Birkin bag, another inheritance from her mother. It felt solid, real, a talisman. He's on his way to buy her a house. Eleanor. With my money. Today. Eleanor's smile faded, replaced by professional admiration. You're sure, Pacific Heights? Surprise. He mentioned it to his broker while he thought I was sleeping last week. June walked toward the door, her posture straight. The heir to a dynasty walking to claim her birthright. Let's see how surprised he is. Down in the town car, Richard Thorne was laughing, his arm around Samantha Lowell. You're going to die when you see it. Sammy. 6 bedrooms, 8 baths, a view of the Golden Gate that will make you weep. The listing agent is meeting us there. We'll make an offer today. All cash. Samantha nestled against him, her manicured hand on his thigh. All cash. Richard. That's, what did the dragon lady leave you with? More than enough. Richard said, his voice dripping with contempt. The prenup was ironclad. But she's sentimental. And stupid. The liquid assets in the joint accounts are massive. Plus, my CEO compensation package, let's just say I've been planning for this day for a long time. He leaned in, whispering against her hair. By the time that dried-up lawyer of hers finishes parsing the paperwork, we'll be living in a palace. And I'll have moved half the funds to the Caimans. What about the company? Samantha asked, a flicker of concern in her blue eyes. June Holdings. Please. The board loves me. I'm the one who doubled the VC returns. She's just a name on the letterhead. A relic. They'll beg me to stay on as CEO. And if they don't? He shrugged. I've had offers. Silicon Valley is littered with startups that would kill for my Rolodex. The car climbed the steep hill into Pacific Heights, passing mansions set behind imposing gates. Richard felt a surge of triumph. This was it. The pinnacle. He'd escaped the gilded cage of the sterling name, taken what he needed, and was about to claim his rightful kingdom with a beautiful young queen by his side. June, with her quiet dinners and her charity galas and her dusty family portraits, was already a ghost. The town car pulled up to a set of ornate iron gates. A handsome man in a sharp suit stood beside a polished silver sign that read exclusive showing BY appointment. The house behind him was a French chateau-style masterpiece, all limestone and slate roofs. This is it, baby, Richard said, kissing Samantha soundly. Home. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his suit jacket. The real estate agent, a man named Chad with a blinding smile, extended a hand. Mr. Thorne. A pleasure. You're going to adore this property. It's truly one of a kind. Let's see it, Richard said, his voice booming with confidence. He slipped his hand into his pocket, pulling out a thin, titanium card, a Coutts World Elite MasterCard, with no preset spending limit, one of 10 such cards he possessed, all linked to the Sterling family accounts. I'm prepared to move quickly. Excellent. Chad beamed. Shall we? As they walked toward the grand front doors, Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. A notification from his banking app, unusual activity alert. He dismissed it with a swipe. Probably just the system flagging the large pending transaction. He'd deal with it later. He was about to cross the threshold of his new life, utterly unaware that behind him, the gates were already beginning to swing shut. Pacific Heights, San Francisco, 2:20 p.m. The grand foyer of the chateau soared 3 stories, a waterfall of Italian marble and light from a massive crystal chandelier. Richard inhaled the scent of new money and old ambition, a perfume more intoxicating than any Samantha wore. The marble is from the same quarry as the Getty Museum. Chad, the agent, was saying, his voice a practiced murmur of reverence. The previous owner was a software titan. Cryptocurrency. Had to liquidate, rapidly. He gave a knowing, conspiratorial wink. Richard wasn't listening. He was walking a slow circle, his Baluti loafers silent on the stone. This wasn't a house, it was a statement. A fortress of success. His success. From the vaulted ceilings adorned with intricate plasterwork to the sweeping staircase that begged for a dramatic entrance. Every square foot screamed dominion. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the rear, the panorama was a postcard, the rusty red of the Golden Gate Bridge, the blue chop of the bay, the green rise of Morin headlands. It was the view he'd sold to himself in 1,000 daydreams while sitting through another interminable Sterling family board meeting. Samantha gripped his arm, her nails pressing into the wool of his sleeve. Richard, it's... She was breathless, her eyes wide. The calculation in them was almost as bright as the awe. She was already placing furniture, imagining parties, seeing the Instagram posts. It's perfect, isn't it? Richard said, pulling her close, kissing her temple. He felt invincible. The signing ceremony, June's pale, composed face, it was all a distant, insignificant prelude to this moment. The master suite is upstairs, takes up the whole west wing. His and her bathrooms, his and her closets the size of your old apartment. He saw the flash in her eyes at the mention of her old, cramped New Valley studio. Keep her grateful, he thought. Keep her impressed. Shall we see the rest? Chad prompted, gesturing toward a wide archway leading to a living area that could comfortably host a couple hundred of their closest friends. As they moved through the echoing rooms, a chef's kitchen with twin La Cornue ranges, a library with empty, mahogany shelves, a screening room with tiered velvet seats. Richard's phone buzzed persistently in his pocket. Texts? Probably. Congratulations from the few friends he'd hinted to about his new beginning. He'd check them later, when he could savor the envy. In the vast, minimalist living room, Samantha drifted to the window wall. "We'll need different furniture," she said, more to herself than to anyone. "Something more modern, less stuffy." Richard chuckled. "Buy whatever you want. Sammy." Blank check. He turned to Chad, who was hovering with the eager stillness of a hunting dog. "What's the number?" "The real number." Chad's smile didn't waver, but his eyes sharpened. "The seller is motivated. Given the liquidity events in the crypto space, they're seeking a swift, clean transaction. They are asking $49.5 million. Richard didn't flinch. The joint investment account he'd been siphoning funds into for the past 18 months held nearly 60 June's money. Patiently, quietly relocated. He'd left enough in the main accounts to avoid suspicion. A decoy balance. The rest was his, waiting for this moment. "We'll take it," Richard said, the words feeling like a coronation. Samantha gasped. A short, sharp sound of pure delight. She rushed over, throwing her arms around his neck. "Oh, Richard. Really, all cash? Close in 30 days. He looked at Chad. "Draw up the papers. Today." "Absolutely, Mr. Thorne. A pleasure to do business with a man who knows what he wants." Chad was already pulling a tablet from his briefcase. "We can do the initial intent electronically right here. Just need to verify funds. A formality. Of course. A wire preview from your bank will suffice." "Of course," Richard said, reaching for his wallet. He extracted not the Coots card, but a sleek, black American Express Centurion card. The black card, the ultimate symbol of unbounded credit. He'd applied for it using June's family's financials as backing. It had arrived 2 weeks ago. He'd been saving its first use for something special. This was perfect. He handed it to Chad. "For the earnest money deposit, whatever the standard is, 3%, that would be $1,485,000, Chad said, tapping on his tablet. He produced a small, wireless card reader. "This will just be a pre-authorization hold. The actual transfer will happen once the purchase agreement is signed." Richard took the reader, punched in his PIN with a flourish, and handed it back. He put his arm around Samantha, pulling her close to watch the transaction complete on the tablet screen. They were a portrait of triumph. Chad's smile froze. He glanced at the tablet, then tapped again. A faint line appeared between his eyebrows. One moment. The network can be spotty in these stone houses." He took a few steps toward the front door, holding the tablet aloft as if seeking a signal. Richard's confidence didn't crack. "Take your time." He nuzzled Samantha's hair. "Start thinking about wallpaper for the nursery." She giggled, swatting his chest. "Richard, one step at a time." Chad returned, his smile now strained at the edges. "My apologies, Mr. Thorne. It seems there's a small issue with the card. It's being declined." A beat of silence. Richard felt Samantha stiffen beside him. "Declined?" Richard's laugh was too loud, echoing in the empty room. "That's impossible. There's no limit on that card. Try it again. You must have swiped it wrong. It's a chip and pin transaction." "Sir." The reader got a response. It was a decline code from the issuer. Chad's voice was carefully neutral. The voice of a man who had seen fortunes evaporate mid-showing. "Perhaps you have another card. Sometimes these systems get a bug." "Ridiculous," Richard snapped. But a sliver of ice had slipped into his gut. He pulled out the Coots card. "Use this." The process repeated. Chad swiped. The tiny reader word. He looked at the tablet, and his face went politely, professionally blank. "I'm sorry, sir. Also declined." "Let me see that." Richard snatched the tablet. The screen showed 2 red lines. "Transaction declined, code 05, do not honor." Then, below it, "Transaction declined, code 51, insufficient funds." Insufficient funds. The words were a physical blow. The joint account had over 20 million in liquid assets. The black card had no preset limit. This was a mistake. A technical glitch. June's lawyers must have put some temporary hold as part of the divorce nonsense. A petty, bureaucratic delay. It's the divorce, he said to Samantha. His voice tight. Automatic freeze on joint accounts. Standard procedure. I have others. He fumbled in his wallet, pulling out a platinum Visa, a World Elite MasterCard, a Chase Sapphire Reserve. He'd opened them all in the last year, using his income and credit, building his own financial profile separate from June's. Or so he'd thought. One by one, Chad ran them. One by one. The tablet screen flashed red. Declined. 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 The air in the magnificent room grew thick and cold. Samantha's grip on his arm had become a vice. Her smile was gone, replaced by a pale, tense confusion. Richard? Her voice was small. I don't understand, Richard said, but the ice in his gut was spreading. He pulled out his iPhone, fingers clumsy. He opened the banking app for the primary joint account, the one that should have had $23 million. He thumbed in the password. Error, account access temporarily restricted. Please contact member services. His breath hitched. He tried the app for the offshore investment account. The one with the $60 million. The one in the Caymans. Under a shell corporation he controlled. Invalid login credentials. He tried again, carefully typing the username and the 16-character password he had memorized. Invalid login credentials. Account locked. Further attempts may trigger security protocols. The world tilted. The marble floor seemed to lurch beneath his feet. June. The name exploded in his mind like a silent bomb. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't standard procedure. This was an attack. Precise, surgical, and devastatingly fast. His phone rang. The generic trill cutting through the horrible silence. The caller ID said security garage. It was the number for the secure, private garage in his, building on Broadway, where he kept his cars. He'd left the Aston Martin there this morning, taking the town car to the lawyer's office. He answered, his voice a croak. Yes, Mr. Thorne? It was the lead security guard, Tony. He sounded uncomfortable. Sorry to bother you. Sir, there's a situation here. What situation? Richard snapped, turning away from Chad and Samantha's staring eyes. There's a repossession team here. Sir. With paperwork. They're taking your vehicles. All three of them. The Ferrari, the Bugatti, and the Aston. They've got flatbeds. I tried to stop them. But the paperwork, it's signed by a Judge Henderson. It's a court order. Sir. It looks legit. Richard's blood turned to sludge in his veins. The cars. The goddamn cars. The toys. The trophies. Bought with company bonuses. But titled in the name of June Holdings, LLC Executive Assets Division. He'd never bothered to transfer the titles. It was a formality. He'd thought. A tax thing. June had never cared about cars. On whose authority? Richard hissed. His back to the room. The paperwork says June Holdings. Acting through its newly appointed interim CEO. Something about asset recovery due to breach of fiduciary duty and misappropriation. I don't know all the legalese. Sir. They're hooking up the Bugatti right now. I'm really sorry. Richard ended the call without another word. He stood, phone clenched in his hand, staring at the breathtaking, unattainable view of the Golden Gate Bridge. He heard Samantha's hesitant footsteps behind him. Richard? What's going on? Who was that? He couldn't turn around. He couldn't face her. The humiliation was a living thing, crawling up his throat. His phone rang again. This time, it was his direct line to his executive assistant at June Holdings. Not Samantha's old number, but the woman who'd replaced her. Emily. He answered, bringing the phone to his ear, saying nothing. Mr. Thorne? Emily's voice was professional, but edged with a strange tension. Sir, I've been trying to reach you. There's an emergency board meeting. It was just called. For 4 p.m. It's mandatory attendance for the CEO and all C-suite. A board meeting. On the day of his divorce. A mandatory emergency meeting he knew nothing about. On what agenda? Richard asked, his voice dangerously calm. I don't have the full agenda, sir. It was circulated by the new corporate secretary. The subject line just says leadership transition and fiduciary review. Leadership transition. The words hung in the air, heavier than the crystal chandelier above him. Leadership transition. They were firing him. They were firing him today. Who called the meeting? He demanded, though he already knew the answer. The notice came from the office of the chairwoman of the board. Sir. The chairwoman. A title that had been purely ceremonial for years. Held by a distant, elderly Sterling cousin in Palm Springs. A title June had quietly, legally assumed 6 months ago. After the cousin's surprise resignation, Richard had laughed about it at the time. Let her have her title. He'd told Samantha. It keeps her busy, makes her feel important. He'd been such a fool. Sir? Emily prompted. Shall I tell them you'll be dialing in? You're listed as in the field on your calendar. I'll be there. Richard growled. And ended the call. He finally turned. Chad was studying a painting on the wall with intense, fake interest. Samantha was staring at him. Her arms crossed over her chest. Her earlier awe completely evaporated, replaced by a cold, wary suspicion. The expression made her look older, harder. It was the look she'd probably given Marks before she'd set her sights on him. We're going, Richard said, his voice rough. What's happening? Richard? Samantha asked, not moving. The cards. The cars. That call. What did you do? Nothing. He exploded, the sound ricocheting off the marble. This is her. This is June. She's throwing a tantrum. Freezing assets. It's a temporary power play. She's trying to embarrass me. It won't work. Trying to embarrass you? Samantha's voice rose. She just had your car stolen. You can't buy a house. What aren't you telling me? Chad cleared his throat. Perhaps, Mr. Thorne, we can reschedule for another time. Once things are settled. His tone made it clear that another time meant never. Richard ignored him. He strode across the vast room, grabbed Samantha by the elbow, and pulled her toward the door. We're leaving. Now. Let go of me. She yanked her arm free, but followed him, her heels clicking furiously on the stone. The dream house receded behind them, its grandeur now a mocking backdrop to his crumbling facade. The town car was still waiting at the curb, the driver looking bored. They got in. The slam of the door like a gunshot in the quiet street. Where to? Sir? The driver asked. The office. June Holdings. Now. And step on it. As the car pulled away, Richard pulled out his phone again. He navigated to his email. His corporate inbox. He typed in his password. Access denied. Your credentials are no longer valid. Please contact IT support. He tried to dial his voicemail. A robotic voice informed him. The mailbox you are trying to reach is no longer in service. He tried the company's internal messaging system. His account was grayed out. Inactive. It was a digital excommunication. Complete. Total. And executed with military precision. In the space of an hour, he had gone from Richard Sterling, CEO, billionaire by marriage, to a man locked out of his own life. Standing on the sidewalk with empty pockets, Samantha was silent beside him, staring out the window, her body rigid. The tension in the car was a physical presence. His phone buzzed again. A San Francisco number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. Then, driven by a desperate, sinking hope that it was someone with an explanation, a mistake, a fix, he swiped to accept. Richard Thorne? A woman's voice, crisp and unfamiliar. Yes, Mr. Thorne. This is Marcia from San Francisco Luxury Leasing. We manage the Filbert Street penthouse. I'm calling regarding your application and the security deposit. Richard's heart, which had been hammering against his ribs, gave a sickening lurch. The penthouse, the sleek, modern, rental penthouse he'd lined up as a temporary base while the Pacific Heights mansion was being finalized. He'd paid the deposit and first month's rent just last week. From a personal account. What about it? He asked. His mouth dry. I'm afraid there's an issue with your financial verification. The bank draft you provided for the deposit was returned. Insufficient funds. We've also been notified that the credit cards you provided for the background check have been declined. We'll need an alternative form of payment within 24 hours. Or we will be forced to rescind the lease offer and the unit will go back on the market. I'm sorry, Mr. Thorne. The call ended. Richard let the phone drop into his lap. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. Insufficient funds. Declined. Rescinded. Locked out. Repossessed. The words swarmed in his head. A chorus of ruin. Samantha finally spoke. Not looking at him. Where are we going to go tonight? Richard? Her voice was flat. Devoid of all the earlier warmth and ambition. My apartment lease ended last month. You said I'd move in with you. He had no answer. The town car, a service billed to the company, was probably the last asset he had that hadn't been repossessed. And it was heading toward the one place he might still have some sliver of power. The one place that was still, nominally, his corner office at June Holdings. But as the car sped through the streets of the city he had aimed to conquer, Richard Thorne felt, for the first time since he'd charmed his way into June Sterling's insulated world, a cold, primal fear. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a declaration of war. And he had just realized, far too late, that he'd severely underestimated the enemy. Broadway Mansion. San Francisco, 3:15 p.m. The silence in the Sterling family mansion on Broadway was not an absence, but a presence. It was the hum of climate control. The whisper of a half-century-old elevator moving between floors. The soft sigh of priceless Persian rugs beneath June's low heels. It was the sound of history. Of money so old it had forgotten how to make noise. It was also the sound of a trap. Meticulously sprung. And June was at its quiet center. She stood in her father's old study. A room of dark wood, green-shaded lamps, and the ghost of cigar smoke. The walls were lined with leather-bound ledgers. Records of fortunes made in railroads, steel, and shipping. Her father, Charles Sterling, had been the last to truly work the ledgers. He taught her their language, not just of profit and loss, but of power, leverage, and consequence. Never let them see you sweat. Juniper, he'd say, using her full name, the one she'd shed for the simpler June in college. And never, ever let them know how much you know until it's too late for them to do anything about it. She was sweating now, but only on the inside. Her hands were steady as she poured a single finger of Macallan 25 into a cut crystal tumbler. She didn't drink it. She held it, feeling the weight of the glass, the amber liquid catching the late afternoon light filtering through the bay windows. It was a prop, a totem of the calm she needed to project. On the massive partner's desk, 3 large computer monitors glowed. They were the only modern things in the room. On the left screen, a live feed from a discreet camera in the Pacific Heights Mansion's foyer showed the back of Chad the realtor's head and the rigid line of Richard's shoulders as he stared at his phone. The audio was crisp. She'd heard every declined transaction, every strained syllable. She watched, unmoving, as Richard grabbed Samantha's arm and they stormed out, the dream of the chateau evaporating like mist. The feed cut to a street camera view as the town car pulled away. Another window on the screen, a GPS tracker, showed the car as a blinking red dot moving south towards the financial district. The center monitor displayed a complex dashboard. One column, labeled Asset Recovery Status, showed a cascade of green checkmarks: primary banking, Coots, Chase, Amex, frozen, complete 1409 PST offshore vehicles, Cayman, BVI, frozen via court order, complete 1412 PST tangible assets, vehicles, repossession in progress, 2 of 3 secured. Corporate access, email network, physical, revoked, complete 1430 PST residential lease, Filbert SD. Payment voided. Lease rescinded, complete 1445 PST. Another column. Phoenix Protocol, Phase 2. Listed items in amber. Awaiting her command. It included entries like, Press release CEO transition. SEC whistleblower package release. And the most ominous, SFPD DA briefing evidence packet. The right-hand monitor was a grid of faces on a secure video call. Her war counsel, Eleanor Vance, her personal attorney, was in her downtown office. The skyline behind her. Her expression was one of grim satisfaction. Phase 1 is operational and effective. The initial shock has been delivered. Beside Eleanor's window was a second, younger face, Michael Chen, Harvard Business School, former Navy JAG officer, and June's most trusted friend. He was now, as of 2:05 p.m. that afternoon, the interim CEO of June Holdings. He was in the company's boardroom, looking calm but alert. The 4 p.m. board meeting is confirmed. Quorum is present via proxy. The vote to ratify my interim appointment and to terminate Richard for cause is a formality. The packets you prepared were compelling. The third face belonged to a man in his late 50s with a weary, intelligent face and the bearing of a retired predator. Lionel Shaw, the head of Sterling Family Security and June's head of private intelligence. His background was murky, ex-special forces, ex-CIA adjacent. His window showed a nondescript office, likely a secure facility. Physical surveillance on Thorn is live. The subject is en route to the June Holdings building. Emotional state is agitated. The female companion, Lowell, is displaying signs of high distress. Audio from the vehicle indicates a fracturing alliance. The fourth and final face was that of David Park, the boyish, brilliant chief technology officer of June Holdings. He was in the server room. The hum of cooling fans a soft backdrop. All access points are sealed. We've initiated the forensic audit script on his former terminal and all associated cloud storage. It's already flagging encrypted files and hidden partitions. The mirroring of his personal devices is complete. We have every text, email, and search query from the last 3 years. June took a small sip of the whiskey, letting the heat bloom in her chest. Thank you, everyone. The speed and precision are commendable. Her voice was even, betraying none of the storm inside her, the humiliated wife, the betrayed partner, the woman who had loved a phantom. That woman was locked away in a soundproof room deep inside her. The person speaking was the chairwoman, the majority stakeholder, the wronged principal, Michael, the board. Any last-minute resistance? Michael shook his head. Old man Henderson grumbled about procedure. But when I showed him the preliminary figures from David's audit, the misallocated funds, the inflated invoices to the dummy vendor Nexus Consulting, he went pale. The others are furious. They feel duped. They're embarrassed they didn't see it. That makes them eager to be seen acting decisively now. The vote will be unanimous. Good. June's eyes flicked to the GPS tracker. The red dot was approaching the June Holdings tower. Lionel. The Samantha Lowell angle. Lionel's expression didn't change. Lowell is a classic opportunist. No significant assets of her own. Substantial credit card debt. She viewed Thorn as a meal ticket. Her emotional investment is in his financial viability, which is currently, he allowed a faint, dry smile. Negative. We have her financials. We also have the recordings from the Post Ranch Inn. The emails planning the distraction spa weekends for you. She's vulnerable. She's also angry. Angry people make mistakes. Keep her in the funnel. If she tries to contact the media or law enforcement, we redirect her. Understood. David. The evidence for the SEC. Is it ready for packaging? David Park nodded, his fingers flying over a secondary keyboard. The algorithm has mapped the money trail. It's beautiful. In a criminal sort of way. He used a cascade of shell core. Nexus Consulting billed June Holdings for market analysis. The funds were paid to a holding account in Delaware. From there, 60% went to a BVI entity called Marlin Ventures, which invested in a series of failing crypto startups that were just hollow fronts. The other 40% went to a Cayman account in the name of Samantha Lowell, trustee, a nice little nest egg for his girlfriend. But the ultimate beneficiary of all the fronts is a single numbered account in Zurich, owned by a discretionary trust. The trust's signatory is Richard Thorn. David looked up. It's textbook embezzlement and wire fraud. I've bundled it with timestamps, forged signature comparisons, and bank transfer records. The SEC will salivate. The U.S. attorney will have a field day. June felt a cold knot in her stomach that had nothing to do with the whiskey. Hearing it laid out so clinically, the sheer scale of the theft, the meticulous planning against her, it was worse than the affair. The affair was a betrayal of her heart. This was a betrayal of her legacy, her family's trust, the livelihoods of the people who worked for the company. It was a violation that struck at the core of who she was. Send the package to Eleanor and Lionel, she said, her voice hardening. We'll decide on the timing of the submission. I want him to feel the walls closing in from all directions before the feds knock on his door. She paused. And the other matter? The one with the heavier contacts. Lionel's face grew even more impassive. Our friends in the Organized Crime Task Force have been very interested in the Marlin Ventures conduit. It appears some of the funds that flowed through it were used to launder proceeds for a crew operating out of Oakland. Low-level arms trafficking. The task force has been building a case. Our information provides the final link between the money and the known players. They are prepared to move. But they'll wait for our signal. They understand this is part of a broader civil and domestic matter, meaning they'd let her have first crack. Meaning Richard wasn't just facing financial ruin and disgrace, he was looking at a RICO indictment. June had made the decision months ago. When Lionel's men had uncovered the connection, she would use every tool, even the dirtiest, to bury him. This wasn't just about getting even. It was about making sure he could never hurt anyone again. Hold that signal, June said. For now. Just then, the left monitor changed. The GPS dot had stopped at the June Holdings building. A new window popped up. A live feed from the building's lavish marble lobby. The camera was high in a corner, giving a god's eye view. Richard Thorne stormed in, his suit jacket flapping, his face a mask of furious indignation. Samantha Lowell trailed a few steps behind, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of fear and fury. June leaned forward, her glass forgotten. The show was entering its second act. Lobby. June Holdings Tower, 3:45 p.m. Richard bypassed the main reception desk, heading straight for the bank of private elevators that led to the executive floors. His face was known. His presence was law. Or it had been. 3 hours ago. He reached for the security panel, placing his thumb on the scanner. A red light blinked. Access denied. He tried again, jamming his thumb down. Access denied. What the hell? He muttered. He tapped his employee ID against the RFID reader. Nothing. A security guard. A large, impassive man named Rodriguez, whom Richard had seen 100 times, approached. Mr. Thorne. Sir. Rodriguez. My biometrics aren't working. There's a glitch. Let me up. Rodriguez didn't move. I'm sorry, sir. I have new directives. Your access to the executive floors has been temporarily suspended. Suspended? By whom? Richard's voice rose, drawing glances from people in the lobby. I'm the CEO. You work for me. My directives come from the office of the chairwoman and the new interim CEO. Sir, I'm afraid I can't let you pass. You're not on the authorized list for today. New interim CEO? The words were a punch to the solar plexus. It was one thing to suspect, another to have it confirmed by a $20 an hour security guard in a public lobby. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through him. Call Michael Chen. Call Eleanor Vance. Call someone with a goddamn brain and get this sorted out now. Samantha had caught up, hovering behind him, her face flushed with humiliation. Richard, for God's sake, she hissed. He ignored her. I have a board meeting in 15 minutes. I demand to be let upstairs. Rodriguez's posture shifted, ever so slightly. It was no longer politely obstructive, it was firm. The board meeting is in progress. Sir, it started at 3:30 p.m. And you are not on the attendee list. He touched the comm piece in his ear. We have a situation at the executive elevators. Requesting additional support. In progress. Richard's mind reeled. They'd started early. They'd locked him out and started without him. The audacity, the utter disrespect, was a physical fire in his veins. He took a step forward. Get out of my way. Rodriguez moved to block him. A solid wall of navy blue uniform. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. You are currently not an employee of June Holdings. And you are trespassing on private property, not an employee. The words echoed in the soaring, echoey lobby. People were openly staring now. Junior associates, consultants, visitors. He saw phones being subtly raised. He was becoming a spectacle. A meme. Fired CEO escorted out. You listen to me. You glorified doorman. Richard spat, his finger jabbing at Rodriguez's chest. I built this company. I doubled its value. That woman upstairs. That ice-cold bitch. She doesn't know the first thing about running a business. She's a trust fund parasite. And you're taking orders from her, his voice echoed. The lobby had gone quiet. Samantha took a full step back, distancing herself. 2 more security guards appeared, flanking Rodriguez. Mr. Thorne, this is your last warning, Rodriguez said, his voice low and even. Leave peacefully, or we will be forced to escort you out. The reality of his powerlessness crashed down. He was outnumbered. He was disgraced. He was broke. The towering, gleaming monument to success around him was no longer his kingdom. It was a cage he was being thrown out of. His shoulders slumped. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. He took a stumbling step back. This isn't over, he muttered, but the threat sounded pathetic, even to his own ears. Yes, sir, Rodriguez said, with no inflection whatsoever. The exit is behind you. Richard turned, his vision blurring with a mix of rage and shame. He saw Samantha, her arms wrapped around herself, looking at him not with sympathy, but with a cold, assessing disgust. The look a person gives a bad bet. He walked toward the giant glass doors, feeling every eye on him. The whispers started before he was even outside. The doors slid open, and the cool San Francisco afternoon air hit him like a slap. Samantha followed him out, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. The moment they were on the sidewalk, she whirled on him. What was that? Each word was a chip of ice. That was a coup. Richard snarled, pacing a few steps. A fucking boardroom coup orchestrated by my insane wife, your ex-wife. Samantha corrected, her voice trembling with fury. As of about 4 hours ago. And it didn't look like a coup. Richard, it looked like you getting fired and thrown out on your ass. What did you do? What did you actually do? I did what I had to do to secure our future. He shot back, gesturing wildly at the towering building behind them. That company was stagnant. I made it grow. I took risks. She's just punishing me for leaving her. She just took everything. Richard. Samantha's composure shattered. The cards. The cars. Your job. Your apartment. I just left my job. My apartment. For you. I have nothing. What is your plan? I have money. He yelled. I have accounts she doesn't know about. Do you? She screamed back. A passerby glanced at them and hurried on. Because it didn't look like it back in that $20 million closet. It looked like a man who's completely broke. The word broke hung in the air between them. It was the ultimate obscenity in their world. Richard's phone buzzed in his pocket. He fumbled for it. A desperate hope flaring. Maybe it was Finch, the lawyer, with a solution. Maybe it was a banker, calling to say it was all a mistake. It was a news alert. Business insider breaking. June Holdings CEO Richard Thorne ousted amidst financial irregularities probe. Michael Chen named interim CEO. He stared at the screen. It was out. It was public. The article would be spreading through every financial news service, every gossip column. His reputation, his carefully crafted image as the brilliant, self-made steward of an old fortune, was evaporating in real time. Samantha saw the look on his face. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You lied to me. You told me you had it all under control. You told me we were set for life. You're not a billionaire. You're a A fraud. She spat the last word. Before he could respond, her own phone rang. She looked at it, her expression shifting from anger to confusion, then to a pale, sickly fear. She answered. Hello? A pause. Her eyes widened, flicking to Richard. What? No. That's not possible. There must be a mistake. Another, longer pause. Her free hand came up to her mouth. I see. Yes. Thank you for letting me know. She ended the call, her hand falling limply to her side. Who was that? Richard demanded. That was the head of HR at Burchard Co. She said, her voice hollow. The firm where she'd worked before Richard had convinced her to quit to focus on their future. They'd just received a letter from June Holdings' legal department and the California Bar Association, alleging industrial espionage and the theft of trade secrets. While I was employed there, they're opening an investigation. They've suspended my professional license pending the outcome. She looked at him, her eyes huge. They said the evidence was compelling and voluminous. What did you do? Richard? What did you have me do? He had, in fact, had her download client lists and prospectus information from Burchard, a rival investment firm. During her last 2 weeks there, he'd used the data to poach 3 major clients for June Holdings. He'd told her it was a harmless competitive intelligence grab. He'd promised her it was untraceable. June. She'd found out. Of course she'd found out. And she was not just cutting him off, she was systematically dismantling every pillar of his life and taking down anyone who stood too close to him. Samantha took another step back, shaking her head. I'm not going down with you. Do you understand me? I'm not going to jail for you. Samantha. Wait, no. The word was final. She turned, flagged a passing cab with a sharp, desperate wave, and yanked the door open. Don't call me. Don't come near me. If you ever cared about me at all, you'll leave me alone. She got in and slammed the door. The cab pulled into traffic and was gone. Richard stood alone on the sidewalk, the wind cutting through his expensive suit jacket. The sun was beginning to set behind the skyscrapers, casting long, cold shadows. He was 38 years old. An hour ago, he was a CEO, a billionaire by marriage, a man about to buy a palace for his mistress. Now, he was unemployed, penniless, publicly disgraced, possibly facing criminal charges, and utterly alone. His phone buzzed again in his hand. Not an alert this time. A call. The screen flashed with a single, dreaded word, June. He stared at it, the device feeling like a live grenade. The woman he had spent years manipulating, deceiving, and robbing was calling him. 10 minutes after his world had ended. He didn't answer. He let it ring, the sound a mocking tattoo against the city's din, until it went to voicemail. A moment later, it started ringing again, and again. June Holdings Tower. Vicinity, 4:30 p.m. The city's ambient noise, the shush of tires on wet pavement, the distant wail of a siren, the fragmented conversations of passers-by, had become a chaotic symphony to Richard's unraveling mind. He stood motionless on the sidewalk, a statue of ruin, as the glass and steel monolith of June Holdings towered over him, a monument to a kingdom that was no longer his. The sun, dipping behind the skyline, painted the building's western face in fiery orange, a cruel, beautiful mockery. His phone had finally stopped ringing. The screen showed 14 missed calls, all from June. Each unanswered call felt like a suture tearing loose, a stitch of his former reality coming undone. The silence that followed was worse. It was a vacuum, pulling at the edges of his panic. He couldn't stand here. He was a spectacle. He could feel the glances, the averted eyes, the subtle increase in pace as people walked by. The Business Insider alert had likely pinged on every phone in a 5-block radius. Ousted amidst financial irregularities probe. The words were branded on the inside of his skull. He started walking, with no destination. His feet carried him north, away from the financial district, towards the seedier edges of the Tenderloin. The suits and leather briefcases gave way to hoodies and shopping carts. The change in scenery matched the internal collapse. Think. You have to think. Money. He needed liquid cash. Now. The joint accounts were frozen. The credit cards were plastic tombstones. The secret Cayman account was locked. But he was a planner. He had contingencies. He ducked into the grimy alcove of a shuttered pawn shop. The smell of urine and stale beer assaulting his senses. This was a place for desperate men. He was now a desperate man. He pulled out his phone. The sleek titanium device, a grotesque anachronism here. He opened a secure messaging app. One that used military-grade encryption. A number was saved under the contact V. Victor. His not-so-legitimate private banker in Zurich. The one who had facilitated the numbered account. The one who asked no questions for a 20% fee. Richard typed. His thumbs clumsy with adrenaline. Emergency. Need immediate liquidity. Wire $500,000 to standard drop. Account frozen. He hit send. The message showed a single grey tick. Sent. Not delivered. He stared at it. The tick didn't turn to 2. It didn't show as red. The app required a data connection. He had full bars. He sent a test message to his own other number. It went through instantly. A cold sweat broke out on the back of his neck. He dialed Victor's number directly. A Swiss landline he had memorized. The phone rang once. Twice. Then a recorded female voice. In crisp German accented English, the number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again. No longer in service. A bank. A point of contact that was supposed to be as permanent as a mountain. Gone. Poof. Like it had never existed. June. It had to be June. But how? How could she possibly have found Victor? The man was a ghost. The connection was through 3 layers of shell corporations. Unless Victor wasn't a ghost. Unless Victor worked for someone else. The thought was a plunge into an ice bath. Had he been playing in a game where the other side owned the referee, the stadium, and the rulebook? A new alert buzzed on his phone, pulling him from the vertigo. An email. From his personal Gmail account. The sender was Nexus Consulting, the dummy corporation he'd created to funnel the money. The blood drained from his face. He opened it. There was no body text. Only a single PDF attachment. He tapped it. The file opening slowly on the grimy street. It was a scanned document. A cover page from the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. Seizure warrant in IEM. Below it, a list of assets. His eyes scanned the legalese, picking out the horrifying highlights: all funds, instruments, and assets held in the name of or for the benefit of Marlin Ventures, a British Virgin Islands entity, all accounts and safe deposit boxes registered to or accessed by Victor J. Gregor, operating as Private Bank Zurich AG, 1 Safety Deposit Box. Number 774. Held at the San Francisco Safety Deposit Vault Co. Under the alias R. Thornfield, his safety deposit box. The one in the basement of the anonymous, granite-faced building on Sutter Street. The one that held $200,000 in untraceable bearer bonds, a fake passport, and a handful of flawless diamonds, his true escape hatch. Gone. Seized by court order. The warrant was signed by a federal judge. Dated yesterday. They had been moving before the divorce was even final. This wasn't a reaction. It was a coordinated assault. He leaned against the cold, gritty brick wall. The phone slipping in his sweaty hand. The scope of the catastrophe was geometric, expanding faster than his mind could process. It wasn't just about locking him out. It was about systematically deleting him from the financial system, erasing his escape routes, turning his secret stashes into evidence. His phone buzzed again. This time, a call. Not from June. From a 415 number he didn't recognize. A San Francisco number. Hope. Stupid and frail. Flickered. Maybe it was Finch, the lawyer. Maybe there was a legal maneuver. Maybe this was all a terrible mistake that could be undone. He answered, bringing the phone to his ear. Hello? His voice was a rasp. Mr. Thorne? A woman's voice. Young. Professional. Utterly devoid of warmth. Yes. Who is this, Mr. Thorne? This is Amanda from the Pacific Union Club membership office. I'm calling to inform you that your membership has been temporarily suspended, pending a review of your status. The Pacific Union Club, the most exclusive, old money club in the city, the place where he'd finally, after years of effort and countless sponsors, gained entry, the ultimate symbol that he had arrived, that the sterling name was now his name. It was where he'd taken Japanese investors, where he'd closed the deal that had made June Holdings a billion-dollar fund. Suspended. On what grounds? He managed to choke out. The membership committee has received information regarding your changed circumstances and the ongoing inquiries into your professional conduct. The club's bylaws require members to be in good standing, both financially and ethically. This is a provisional suspension while the board convenes. You will be notified of their decision. Please refrain from attempting to access the club premises or using the club's name in any affiliation. Good day, Mr. Thorne. The call ended. He was being erased. Not just from his company. Not just from his bank accounts. From the very fabric of the society he had fought so hard to infiltrate. The clubs, the charities, the boards, they would all follow. He was becoming a non-person. A ghost with a burning wallet. His phone buzzed again. And again. Alerts flooded in. An email from the first tee golf tournament, regretfully rescinding his honorary chairmanship. A text from the head of the San Francisco Symphony Ball. A woman he donated 6 figures to. Simply saying, under the circumstances, we think it best you not attend this year's gala. A check refunding your table purchase will be mailed. A notification that his corporate Amex, the one linked to June Holdings, had been permanently cancelled. Each ping was a tiny, precise incision. Death by 1,000 cuts. Administered remotely, digitally, with chilling efficiency. The sky had darkened from orange to deep indigo. The street lights flickered on, casting a sickly yellow glow. He was shivering. His suit jacket was meant for climate-controlled boardrooms, not the damp San Francisco evening. He had no car. No home to go to. The Filbert Street penthouse was a mirage. He thought of the Broadway mansion, with its warm, silent rooms and priceless art. His art, he'd thought. His home. Now it was just June's mausoleum. He couldn't go there. He wouldn't be allowed past the gate. He needed a place to think. To plan. A drink. A very, very strong drink. He remembered a dive bar a few blocks over. In North Beach. A place he'd gone a lifetime ago. Before June. When he was just a hungry, ambitious analyst with more drive than money. A place where no one would recognize Richard Sterling. Disgraced CEO. The bar was called The Hideout. It lived up to its name, dark. Smoky despite the citywide ban. And smelling of stale beer and despair. The few patrons, lone drinkers. A couple arguing in a booth, barely glanced up as he entered. He slid onto a cracked vinyl stool at the far end of the bar. The bartender, a grizzled man with a tattoo sleeve, wiped the counter in front of him. What'll it be, Macallan? 18. Neat. It was a reflex. The order of his former life. The bartender raised an eyebrow. We got Dewars. Or Jack. Richard almost laughed. A bitter, choked sound. Jack. Double. Neat. The glass thudded in front of him. Amber liquid swirling. He threw it back. The burner welcome anchor in the swirling chaos. He signaled for another. As the bartender poured. Richard's phone. Face up on the bar. Lit up. The screen glowed in the dim light. June. Call number 15. He stared at it. The rage returned. A white-hot coal in his chest. Who did she think she was? The wronged wife. Sitting in her castle. Doling out punishments like some medieval queen? He had built that company. He had taken her family's sleepy, old money trust and turned it into a dynamic, respected force. He'd made her richer. He'd given her status, excitement. And this was her thanks. To destroy him, the ringing was an accusation, a taunt. He couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand the silence that followed it, either. He needed to hear her voice. He needed to scream at her. To make her see what she was doing. To make her stop, with a hand that trembled only slightly, he picked up the phone. He took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to muster the commanding, arrogant tone that had always cowed her. He failed. His voice, when he finally spoke, was raw, stripped bare. June. It came out as a whisper. There was a pause on the other end, a beat of perfect, poised silence. Then her voice, cool, calm, and clear, as if she were discussing the weather. Richard, I was beginning to think you'd lost your phone. The sheer, breathtaking normality of her tone knocked the air from his lungs. What have you done? The question was a plea, a demand, a sob, all at once. Done? She repeated, as if genuinely puzzled. I haven't done anything. Richard, I'm simply executing the terms of our divorce, protecting marital assets during the review period. The judge was quite clear on my fiduciary responsibilities. Fiduciary, he sputtered, the rage bubbling over. You froze my accounts. You stole my cars. You had me thrown out of my own company. In front of everyone, your accounts. Her voice gained a slight, sharp edge. Those were joint accounts, funded primarily by the dividends of my family's holdings. The cars were titled to June Holdings, a company from which you have just been terminated for cause. And as for the company, the board made a business decision, one based on overwhelming evidence of misconduct. I had nothing to do with it. The lie was so brazen, so perfectly delivered. It was breathtaking. You're a liar, he hissed, lowering his voice, conscious of the bartender. This is you. All of it. This is your petty, vindictive little revenge because I left you for someone younger. Someone who actually has a pulse. The silence that followed was different this time. It was cold. So cold he could feel it through the phone. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, quieter, and infinitely more dangerous. Let's be very clear. Richard, you didn't leave me. You were caught. You were caught embezzling from me. From my family's company. To fund your affair and your grotesque lifestyle. You were caught conspiring to defraud our investors. You were caught lying, cheating, and stealing for years. I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself. I am merely turning out the lights on your way out. Each word was a precisely aimed dart. Embezzling, defraud, lying, cheating, stealing. She knew. She knew everything. You have no proof, he whispered, the defiance hollow. I have a 400-page forensic audit. Richard, I have bank records from here to Zurich. I have recorded conversations with a gentleman named Victor Gregor. I have the signed invoices from Nexus Consulting for services never rendered. I have the security footage of you and Samantha Lowell at the Post Ranch Inn on the weekends you told me you were fly fishing in Montana. Her voice was a monotone of utter certainty. I have enough proof to put you in a federal prison for the rest of your natural life. The only question is whether I choose to hand it all over to the U.S. attorney tomorrow morning. The world tilted again. The bar. The smell of whiskey. The dim light. It all receded. He was in a vacuum. And her voice was the only thing in it. Spelling out his annihilation. Prison. Orange jumpsuits. Concrete walls. The end of everything. What do you want? The question was a surrender. All the fight was gone. Bled out of him onto the sticky bar floor. I want you to understand the situation, she said, her tone shifting back to that infuriating, calm rationality. You have nothing. The money is gone. The assets are frozen or repossessed. Your reputation is ruined. Your companion has wisely chosen to distance herself. You are, for all intents and purposes, a non-entity in this city. A ghost with a mountain of debt and several pending criminal referrals. He closed his eyes. Why are you telling me this? To gloat? No, she said, and he could almost hear her slight, humorless smile. I'm telling you this to make you an offer. An offer. A lifeline. His heart, which had been a cold stone, gave a feeble thump. What offer? You will sign a document, prepared by my lawyers, that does the following. First, you will irrevocably forfeit any and all claims to any asset, property, or financial instrument acquired during our marriage. This includes, explicitly, any hidden assets you believe I am unaware of. Second, you will voluntarily resign from all boards and positions associated with the Sterling family interests, with a public statement citing personal reasons. Third, you will sign a full confession regarding the financial misconduct at June Holdings, accepting sole responsibility. A confession. He breathed. You want me to go to jail? The confession will be held in escrow. She continued, as if he hadn't spoken. It will not be released to the authorities unless you violate the terms of our agreement. The primary term is this: you will leave California tonight. You will not contact me, my family, or any associate of June Holdings ever again. You will disappear. Disappear. It sounded like a death sentence, but a quieter one than prison. And if I do this, what do I get? You get to avoid federal prison. You get to keep the clothes on your back, and you will receive a one-time wire transfer of $100,000 to an offshore account of your choosing, an account I will, of course, be aware of. It is not enough to restart your life. It is enough to have your life somewhere very, very far from here. $100,000. A pittance. A rounding error in the life he'd lived hours ago. But now, in this dive bar, with no cards, no cash, and a safety deposit box full of evidence against him, it was a fortune. It was a way out. And if I don't? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Then at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Special Agent in Charge Miller of the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and investigators from the SEC, will receive a comprehensive dossier. The press will receive a separate, but equally detailed, package. You will spend tonight in whatever flop house you can afford, and you will likely spend the next decade in a federal correctional institution. The choice is yours. The choice. There was no choice. It was surrender or destruction. She had planned for every contingency, blocked every exit. She had backed him into a corner so tight he could barely breathe. I need to think. He stammered. You have until 8 p.m. to be at the Vance Crow offices. Eleanor will have the papers. Sign them. A car will take you to the airport. A one-way ticket to anywhere will be provided. The wire will be initiated upon confirmation of your departure. Do not be late. Richard. The offer expires at 8:01. The line went dead. He sat there, the phone pressed to his ear, listening to the dial tone. The bartender was looking at him with a mixture of pity and disinterest. Richard slowly lowered the phone. He looked at the empty glass in front of him. He held up a finger for another. As the bartender poured, Richard's phone lit up again. Not a call. A text message. From an unknown number. It was a photograph. A PDF. Actually. But the preview showed enough. It was the first page of a federal indictment. United States of America versus Richard Alistair Thorne. The charges were listed: wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. The document was dated, tomorrow. Below the image, a single line of text, a preview of tomorrow's headlines. Your choice. JIT wasn't enough that she had cornered him. She had to twist the knife. She had to show him the abyss, and then offer him a single, frayed rope. He downed the second whiskey in one gulp, the burn doing nothing to warm the ice in his soul. It was 5:47 p.m. He had a little over 2 hours to decide how he wanted to be erased, quietly, with a whimper and a one-way ticket to oblivion, or loudly, in a blaze of scandal and steel bars. He fumbled in his pocket. His wallet. He opened it. Inside, tucked behind a condom he hadn't needed in years, was a single, folded $100 bill. Emergency cash. The last physical currency he owned in the world. He threw it on the bar, not waiting for change, and stumbled back out into the cooling night. The city lights were on, glittering and indifferent. Somewhere out there, in a mansion on a hill, June Sterling was waiting. And he had a date with destiny, or damnation. At 8 p.m. sharp. North Beach, San Francisco, 6:15 p.m. The $100 bill was gone. Surrendered to the sticky darkness of the hideout. Richard walked. The double Jack Daniels low. Corrosive fire in his empty stomach. Doing little to burn away the panic. Her ultimatum echoed in the hollows of his mind, 8 p.m. Sign. Disappear. Disappear. The word tasted like ash. It meant no fight. It meant admitting she'd won. Completely and utterly. It meant slinking out of the city that was supposed to be his trophy. A beaten dog with its tail between its legs. It meant a lifetime of looking over his shoulder. Of knowing that June Sterling held a signed confession that could send him to prison with a snap of her fingers. He'd be her puppet. Forever. Dangling by $100,000 string. But the alternative, the indictment preview on his phone, was a vivid, waking nightmare. Prison. Orange. Steel. The end of every fantasy. Every ambition. Every shred of dignity. He'd seen men like that, soft, white-collar criminals ground to paste in the system. He wouldn't survive a year. He needed leverage. He couldn't go to that meeting with nothing. He had to find a crack in her armor. Something she hadn't accounted for. Something he could use to negotiate. The money was gone. The assets were seized. But information? Secrets? He'd spent years at the heart of the Sterling Empire. He knew things. Dirty things. A name surfaced in the murk of his memory, Councilman Ramirez. Eduardo Ramirez. The ambitious, perpetually smiling representative from the Mission District. Richard had funneled $250,000 in consulting fees from a June Holdings community development fund to a shell company owned by Ramirez's brother-in-law. The quid pro quo was a crucial zoning variance for a luxury condo project June Holdings had a silent stake in. The project had gone through. The money had vanished into a renovation of Ramirez's constituent services office. It was a classic, small-time San Francisco graft. And Richard had the emails, the transfer records, the signed but backdated consulting agreement. He'd kept them, not out of caution, but as a potential tool. A councilman owed you a favor. That was useful. A councilman you could destroy. That was power. He'd stored the files not on any company server, not in the cloud, but on a physical, encrypted USB drive. A tiny, unassuming stick he kept taped to the back of a framed, hideous abstract painting in their home office on Broadway. A painting June loathed. She'd never moved it, never touched it. It was the one secret hiding place she wouldn't think to look, because it was in her house. Hope, desperate and jagged, pierced the fog of despair. If he could get that drive, he'd have something. He could threaten to expose a bribery scandal that would splash mud all over the pristine Sterling name. It might be enough to make June back off. To negotiate a better deal. Maybe more money. Maybe a non-prosecution agreement in writing. Maybe just the satisfaction of seeing a flicker of fear in those icy eyes. But getting into the Broadway mansion was impossible. The gates. The security system. The staff loyal to June. He'd been digitally and physically excommunicated. Or had he? There was one person. Margot. The day housekeeper. A sweet, grandmotherly woman from El Salvador who had been with the family for 20 years. She adored June. Of course. But she'd also always had a soft spot for Richard. He'd been charming. Remembered her grandchildren's names. Given her extravagant Christmas bonuses, with June's money. More importantly, Margot finished her shift at 7 p.m. She left through the service entrance in the back, which had a simpler, older keypad lock. The code was Margot's birthday. 10:15. October 15th. He knew because he'd had to let her in once when the system glitched. June had been out of town. He'd never bothered to tell her he knew the code. A tiny oversight in her perfect security. If he timed it right, he could slip in just after Margot left, before the full nighttime security protocol engaged. Get in. Get the drive. Get out. He had to try. It was the only card left to play. He checked his watch, 6:20 p.m. He had time. He started walking with purpose, heading towards the affluent neighborhoods, his mind racing. He needed to look presentable, not like a man who'd been drinking in a dive bar. He ducked into the lobby of a boutique hotel on Union Square, beelined for the men's room, and splashed cold water on his face. He combed his hair with his fingers, straightened his tie, adjusted his suit jacket. The man in the mirror looked haunted, his eyes bloodshot, his complexion sallow. But he could still pass for a harried executive. He exited onto the street and raised his arm. A taxi, yellow and anachronistic, pulled over. Broadway, near Divisadero, he said, sliding in. And step on it. He had no way to pay. But that was a problem for later. One crisis at a time. The ride was a blur of neon and anxiety. As the cab climbed into Pacific Heights, the streets grew wider, quieter, lined with the imposing, silent facades of immense wealth. His own street. The cab slowed as they approached the Sterling mansion, a Beaux-Arts confection of limestone and wrought iron set behind high walls and mature magnolia trees. Here, Richard said, pointing to a spot half a block down, out of direct sight of the main gate. Wait for me. I'll be 10 minutes. There's an extra 50 in it for you if you keep the meter running and don't move. The driver, an older man with a weary face, just grunted. Richard got out. The cool, eucalyptus-scented air of the hill doing nothing to calm his nerves. He walked casually, as if he belonged, which, until today, he had. He passed the main gate. Through the intricate ironwork, he could see lights on in the west wing, the study, the library. Was she in there, watching her screens, monitoring his destruction? The thought sent a fresh bolt of hatred through him. He continued to the end of the property wall, where a narrower, less ornate service gate was set into the stone. It was designed for deliveries. For staff. He stood in the shadow of a cypress tree, pulling out his phone. 6:58 p.m. Any minute. He didn't have to wait long. At 7:02 p.m. exactly, he heard the faint click and hum of the electric lock disengaging. The service door swung inward, and Margot stepped out, bundled in a practical coat, a large tote bag over her shoulder. She turned, said something to someone inside, probably the evening security guard. Jorge then pulled the door shut behind her. It locked automatically with a solid thunk. Richard held his breath. Margot walked down the service alley towards the bus stop on the main road, her figure receding. Now, the security protocol would have a brief grace period, a minute or two, before the system rearmed fully for the night, activating motion sensors and interior alarms. It was a window for Jorge to do his final rounds. He moved swiftly. 1-0-1-5. He punched the numbers into the weathered keypad. A green light glowed. A soft click. He pushed the heavy door open just enough to slip through, into the familiar, dimly lit service corridor that smelled of lemon polish and laundry soap. He closed it silently behind him. He was in the heart of the enemy's castle. He knew the house's rhythms. Jorge's first round would take him to the ground floor living areas, then the perimeter. Richard had maybe 5 minutes. He moved silently, his dress shoes making no sound on the thick runner, past the spotless kitchen, through the butler's pantry, and into the main hallway. The house was silent, vast, and oppressively familiar. The portraits of stern-faced Sterling ancestors seemed to watch him with disdain. The home office was on the second floor, at the front of the house. He took the back stairs, the narrow, carpeted servants' staircase, 2 at a time. He emerged into the second-floor hallway. A sliver of light spilled from under the door of the master bedroom suite at the far end. Her room now. Was she in there? His pulse hammered in his ears. He ducked into the office, closing the door softly behind him. The room was dark, illuminated only by the city lights filtering through the tall windows. He didn't turn on a lamp. He went straight to the far wall, to the large, ugly painting, a chaotic splatter of red and black that a promising artist friend of June's had given them. He hated it. He'd kept it for this exact reason. With careful fingers, he lifted the heavy frame off the wall and laid it face down on the deep Persian rug. There, taped to the cardboard backing, was a small, black USB drive, no larger than a thumbnail. He peeled it off, the tape coming away with a soft rip that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. He slipped the drive into his pants pocket, his heart thudding against his ribs. He had it. He lifted the painting to rehang it. As he did, his eyes fell on the desk. June's desk. Neat, Organized. A single, closed laptop. A framed photo of her parents. And next to it, a familiar, matte black satellite phone. The one she'd used to initiate the Phoenix protocol. The one that connected to Lionel Shaw. To her private network. The ultimate key to her war room. A reckless, insane idea seized him. If the USB drive was a scalpel, that phone was a bomb. What was on it? Communications. Orders. Evidence of her own actions. If he could take it, he wouldn't just have leverage, he'd have the power to unravel her entire operation. He could expose her methods. Maybe even find something illegal. He could turn the tables. He was across the room in 2 strides. He reached for the phone. I wouldn't do that. Richard. The voice, cool and dry as a desert wind, came from the doorway. He froze. His hand inches from the phone. Slowly, he turned. June stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the hall light. She was still dressed in the elegant, simple navy dress she'd worn to the signing, but she'd removed her heels. She looked smaller, yet infinitely more formidable. In her hand, she held a heavy, crystal tumbler, the one from the study. He realized. She took a small sip, her eyes never leaving his face. They were not the eyes of a woman who had been crying. They were the eyes of a surgeon assessing a tumor. How, he started, but the word died in his throat. How did I know you'd come for the drive behind the dreadful Klein painting? She finished for him. Because I've known about it for 8 months. Richard. Lionel's men swept the house for listening devices after we discovered the fraud. They found yours. A very clever, battery-powered model. I left it in place. I wanted to see what you valued enough to hide in my own home. She shook her head. A gesture of profound disappointment. Councilman Ramirez. Really? You think threatening a minor, corrupt politician would sway me? His brother-in-law's company has already been dissolved. Ramirez is currently being interviewed by the FBI Public Corruption Unit. The evidence you so helpfully preserved was handed to them this afternoon. He'll be too busy saving his own skin to be of any use to you. In fact, he's probably naming you as the source of the bribe right about now. Richard felt the floor drop out from under him. The USB drive in his pocket was now just a piece of plastic. Worthless. A trap he'd walked right into. You're monitoring the house, he whispered, the full extent of her surveillance dawning on him. Of course. The motion sensors in this room alerted me the moment you crossed the threshold. I was just next door. She took a step into the room. You were always so predictable. Richard. You think in straight, greedy lines. When cornered, you go for the hidden stash. The secret weapon. You can't conceive of a plan that doesn't involve a trick. A cheat. A hidden card. The fury returned, burning away the last of his fear. And you? What's your plan, June? To play the avenging angel? You're not righteous. You're just a rich bitch who got her feelings hurt and is using daddy's money to throw a tantrum. A flicker of something, pain, perhaps, crossed her face. So fast he might have imagined it. It was replaced by a cold, glacial calm. This isn't about my feelings. This is about justice. And balance. You took. Now you give back. Everything. I gave you everything. He shouted. The sound swallowed by the thick drapes and books. I gave you a life. I made you relevant. You were a dusty museum piece before I came along. Now she smiled. A thin, terrifying curve of her lips. You gave me lies. You gave me betrayal. You gave me the invaluable gift of seeing exactly who you are. And for that, I suppose, I should thank you. She set her glass down on a side table with a precise click. Now, you have a decision to make. You can walk out of here, go to Eleanor's office, sign the papers, and get on a plane. Or you can stay. And I will call the SFPD and report a home invasion by my violent, unstable, and recently disgraced ex-husband. Given the restraining order I filed this afternoon, and the fact that you are trespassing with clear intent, stealing that drive, attempting to take my phone, I imagine the response will be swift, and not particularly gentle, which will make your eventual meeting with the federal authorities that much more complicated. A restraining order. She'd thought of everything. He was trapped. Again. The walls of the beautiful, hateful room seemed to close in on him. You win. He spat, the words tasting like poison. You happy? You destroyed me. You win. I'm not happy, Richard, she said, and for the first time, she sounded tired. I'm finished. Now get out of my house. He stood there for a long moment, paralyzed by impotent rage. Then, shoulders slumping in defeat, he turned and walked past her, out the door. He didn't look back. He retraced his steps down the back stairs, through the silent service corridor. He pushed open the service door. The night air was cold. The taxi was still there, idling, the meter a glowing green tally of his mounting debt. As he walked towards it, his phone buzzed. A new email. From Eleanor Vance. The subject, documents for review signing urgent. Attached was the confession, the forfeiture, the non-disclosure agreement, the blueprint for his extinction. He got into the taxi. The driver glanced at him in the rear-view mirror. Where to now? Chief, Richard gave the address of the Vance Crowe offices. As the cab pulled away, he looked back at the Sterling mansion. A light went on in a third-floor window, a room he'd never paid much attention to. A sitting room. He saw a figure, slender and straight, pass in front of the window. June. Watching him leave. He turned away, facing forward into the dark, uncertain night. The unraveling was complete. There was nothing left of the empire he'd tried to build, nothing left of the man he'd pretended to be. All that remained was the signature on a piece of paper. And the long, empty road to nowhere. Downtown San Francisco, 7:45 p.m. The taxi was a purgatory on wheels. The meter's relentless click, a digital cricket counting his last moments of free will, had ticked past $60. The driver's radio played a tinny, melancholic country song about lost highways. A soundtrack so on the nose it felt like a mockery staged by June herself. Richard stared, unseeing, at the blur of neon and streetlights, the USB drive a dead weight in his pocket. The phantom image of June in the doorway burned onto his retinas. You were always so predictable. Her words were the nails in his coffin. He'd marched straight into her trap. A mouse following the scent of cheese into the spring-loaded jaw. The councilman gambit was dead. The drive was useless. He had nothing. No. Worse than nothing, he had liabilities. Samantha was gone. Probably lawyering up. The FBI was sniffing around Ramirez. The SEC was building a case with evidence he now knew was voluminous and damning. And June held the detonator. The cab pulled up to the sleek, dark tower that housed Vance Crowe. Richard's hand hesitated on the door handle. Once he stepped out, once he rode that elevator to the 40th floor, it was over. He'd be signing his life away. A ghost with a price tag. That'll be $68.50, the driver said, turning in his seat. Richard met his eyes in the mirror. I don't have it. My cards are frozen. The driver's weary face hardened. You gotta be kidding me. You said there was an extra 50. I know what I said. It's a complicated day. The understatement of the century. He fumbled in his pockets, pulling them inside out like a cartoon hobo. Empty but for lint and the USB drive. His watch. A Patek Philippe. A gift from June for their 3rd anniversary. Worth over $100,000. Take this. He started to unbuckle it. The driver snorted. I don't want your fake watch, buddy. I want $68.50. It's not fake. It's real. It's worth a fortune, yeah. And I'm the King of England. Get out. Now. Before I call the cops. Defeated even by a cab driver. Richard stumbled out onto the curb. The driver leaned over, yelling through the passenger window. Deadbeat. Before squealing away from the curb, leaving Richard standing in the gust of its exhaust. He looked up at the tower. The lights of the Vance Crowe offices glowed on the top floors. Eleanor was up there, waiting with the papers. The clock was ticking. 7:52 p.m. His phone buzzed. Not a call. A calendar alert. Reminder, dinner with investors, the progress 8:00 p.m. A dinner he'd scheduled months ago. A table for 6. He was supposed to be there now. Sipping a cocktail. Exuding confidence. closing a round of funding for a new biotech venture. The life that was supposed to be his. The life that was now someone else's. The absurdity of it hit him. A hysterical bubble rising in his throat. He was supposed to choose between a 5-star meal and signing a confession that would exile him from civilization. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, drawing a concerned glance from a well-dressed couple entering the building. He didn't go inside. Instead, he turned and started walking, driven by a primitive, panicked need to move. To not be in that lobby when the clock struck 8. His feet carried him west, towards the water, towards the one place in the city that had ever felt neutral. A place that belonged to neither his old poverty nor his stolen luxury, the waterfront near Fisherman's Wharf. The tourist chaos was a blessing. The crowds, the shrieking seagulls, the smell of fried dough and salt water, it was a sensory barrage that drowned out the screaming in his head. He pushed past families with giant stuffed animals, past street performers, past stalls selling cheap trinkets. He walked until the commercial frenzy gave way to the quieter, darker piers where fishing boats bobbed in the inky water. He found a deserted bench on a pier. The wood damp and cold. The city glittered across the bay. A galaxy of lights that had once sparkled with promise. Now it just looked like a distant, hostile planet. The Golden Gate Bridge, its towers lit against the night sky, was no longer a symbol of grandeur, but a barrier. A gate he was being shoved out of. He took out his phone. The screen was a ledger of his ruin. Missed calls, 22 from June. The last one, over an hour ago. He opened his email. Another message from Eleanor. Timestamped 7:55 p.m. Subject, urgent, your decision. The body was a single line. June is awaiting confirmation. The 8 p.m. deadline is firm. It was 8:07 p.m. He was already late. The offer, she'd said, expired at 8:01. He had defaulted. He had chosen prison by indecision. A cold, fatalistic calm settled over him. So be it. If he was going down, he'd go down swinging. He'd make one last call. Not to beg. Not to negotiate. To tell her exactly what he thought of her. To pour every ounce of venom, every shred of bitterness, into her ear. He'd deny her the satisfaction of his silent surrender. He pulled up her contact. He stared at the name. June. For years, that name had been an access code. A key to vaults. Now it was a target. His thumb hovered over the call button. Rage, hot and pure, flooded his veins, burning away the fear, the shame, the calculation. He pressed it. It rang once, twice. Then, her voice, cool and unsurprised. Richard, you're late. The calm in her tone was the final spark. The dam broke. You want to talk about late? He snarled, his voice trembling with the force of his fury. I'm late to the party you threw in my honor. The kick Richard while his down gala. Well, here I am. June, the guest of Dishonor. Are you happy now? Sitting in your fucking castle, counting your fucking money, watching my life burn on your security monitors. Do you get off on it? There was a pause. He could hear her breathing, slow and even. I told you the terms. You chose not to accept them. Accept them? He laughed. A raw, ugly sound. You gave me a choice between a firing squad and a beheading. That's not a choice. That's a sadistic game. You're not some avenging angel. You're a vindictive, heartless bitch who can't stand that someone finally saw you for the empty, frigid shell you are and wanted something real. The words poured out. A torrent of poison he'd been storing for years. You think this is about the money? The embezzling? Please. This is about your ego. Your pathetic, fragile little ego couldn't handle that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life worshipping at the altar of St. June of the Trust Fund. I made you interesting. I gave you a life beyond charity galas and museum boards. And you repay me by trying to destroy me? You're a monster. A carefully dressed, well-spoken monster. He was pacing now on the damp pier. The phone pressed to his ear. His free hand slicing the air. And you know the funniest part? The most hilarious, goddamn tragic part? I loved you. Once. When I first met you. I thought you were this, rare, Beautiful thing. Untouched. I thought I could be the one to wake you up. But you know what I woke up? A calculator with a pulse. A fucking spreadsheet in a Diane von Furstenberg dress. Your idea of passion is a balanced portfolio. Your idea of risk is a slightly aggressive municipal bond, he was screaming now, the words tearing at his throat. But he didn't care. So go ahead. Send your files to the FBI. Ruin me. It won't change what you are. It won't fill that big, empty house. It won't make anyone love you. You'll die alone in that mausoleum, surrounded by portraits of dead people who were probably just as cold and miserable as you are. He stopped, chest heaving. The silence on the other end of the line absolute. He'd said it. He'd thrown every brick he had. He waited for her to hang up, for the line to go dead. But it didn't. He heard a soft, almost imperceptible sound. A sharp, quick inhalation. Then her voice, when it came, was different. Not cold, not calm. It was quiet, thin, stripped of all its armor. It was the voice of the woman he'd glimpsed years ago. The one he'd thought he could save. Is that what you think? She whispered. That I'm empty. The rawness of it threw him. He'd expected fury, icy contempt. Not this vulnerability. It disarmed him. What, you said you loved me once? She said. The words barely audible over the sound of the bay water slapping the pilings. When? The question. So simple. So devastating. Lodged in his throat. What does it matter? It matters to me. Her voice gained a sliver of strength. Tell me. When? He leaned against a cold metal railing. The fight draining out of him. Replaced by a bewildered exhaustion. The beginning. Napa. That weekend at the vineyard. You were different. You laughed. You got sunburned. You didn't talk about dividends or board meetings. You talked about the soil. The grapes. The history. You seemed real. A long silence. He could almost see her. Sitting in the dark study. The glass of whiskey forgotten. I was real, she said. And now her voice was thick with a pain so profound it was a physical presence on the line. I was happy. With you. I let you in. Richard. I let you past the gates. Past the lawyers. Past the security. I gave you the combination to the vault. Not just the money. Me. He had no answer. The memory was a phantom limb. Aching. And you know what you did? She continued. The pain curdling into something harder. You took notes. You saw a blueprint. You saw vulnerability as a design flaw. My happiness was a tool. My trust was a lever. You didn't wake up a spreadsheet. Richard. You turned a person into one. You itemized me. My networks. My assets. My name. And then you started skimming from the ledger. First, my confidence. Then, my dignity. Then, my future. June, no. You spoke. Now I speak. The steel was back. But it was brittle. Forged in grief. You want to know what's in the house? It's not empty. It's full of ghosts. The ghost of the man I thought you were. The ghost of the life I thought we were building. The ghost of every dream I was stupid enough to have while you were in bed with your assistant. Planning how to loot my family's legacy. Her voice broke. Just for a second. You didn't steal from a company. Richard. You stole from me. You stole the woman I was. And I want her back. And the only way to get her back is to burn every trace of you out of my life. Starting with the lie of you that's still walking around. The confession. The raw, unfiltered truth of her hurt. Was more terrifying than any legal threat. He had seen her angry. He had never seen her shattered. And he had done that. I'm sorry, he said. The words were utterly inadequate. Dust in a hurricane. Are you? The question was a blade. Are you sorry you did it? Or are you sorry you got caught? Are you sorry you hurt me? Or are you sorry your money's gone? He opened his mouth. But no sound came out. The truth was a greasy, shameful thing in his gut. He was sorry for all of it. But mostly, he was sorry he was here. On this cold pier. With nothing. She heard his silence. And in that silence, she found her answer. That's what I thought. Her voice was flat again. The moment of vulnerability sealed over. A wound cauterized. The offer is still on the table. Richard. Not out of mercy. Out of efficiency. A trial would be messy. Public. It would keep you in my life. In the news. A constant reminder. I want you gone. Truly gone. The papers. The wire. The plane. It's the cleanest way. And the confession. The one I sign? You'll just hold it over me forever. Yes. She said. Without a hint of apology. It's your leash. The only one you get. You behave. You disappear. You never contact me or mine again. And it stays in a vault. You so much as breathe in my direction. And it goes to the authorities. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's a probation for a crime you absolutely committed. Take it. Or don't. But decide now. This is the last time we will ever speak. The finality of it was absolute. The last time. The 88th call. The one where all the masks came off. Where the raw, bleeding truth of their mutual destruction was laid bare. There was no leverage left. No hidden card. No trick. There was only this, a chance to run. With a collar around his neck. Or a chance to be put down. He looked out at the dark, endless Pacific. A one-way ticket to somewhere across it. $100,000 to start a ghost life. It was nothing. It was everything. I'll sign. He said. The words tasting of defeat and salt air. Eleanor is waiting. The car will take you to SFO. A ticket to Bangkok is booked in the name on the passport you'll find in the envelope with the money. It leaves at 11:45. Be on it. Bangkok. A world away. A place to disappear. June, he started, not knowing what he wanted to say. Goodbye? Go to hell? I'm sorry, but the line was already dead. The 88th call had ended. He stood on the pier for a long time. The phone cold in his hand. The city's lights shimmered. Distant and indifferent. The rage was gone. Burned out. The fear was a dull, constant ache. All that was left was a hollow, yawning emptiness. And the faint, terrible understanding of what he had truly lost. And what he had truly been. He turned and began the long, slow walk back to the tower. To sign his name on the dotted line of his own obliteration. Vance Crowe offices, 8:45 p.m. The silence in Eleanor Vance's corner office was a physical thing. Thick and expensive. Like the air in a tomb. The 40th floor view was a panoramic postcard of the glittering bay. A view Richard had once felt he owned a piece of. Now it was just a backdrop to his surrender. Eleanor sat behind her minimalist desk. A monument to polished steel and sharp angles. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She was a conduit. A human notary. Arrayed before her were 3 documents. Their dense blocks of text, a prison of legalese. The asset forfeiture and release. She began. Her voice devoid of all inflection. By signing, you irrevocably waive any and all claims, known or unknown, to any asset, property, financial instrument, or interest acquired during your marriage to June Sterling, or held in any trust, corporation, or entity under her control or beneficial ownership. This includes, but is not limited to, the contents of any and all safety deposit boxes, digital wallets, and offshore accounts previously disclosed or otherwise. She slid a heavy, silver pen across the glass desktop. It stopped an inch from his fingers. Richard stared at it. The pen. His signature. The final act of self-annihilation. He picked it up. It was cold. He scrawled his name at the bottom of the 3-page document. The loops of the R and D looking like the bars of a cage. The confidentiality and non-disclosure agreement. Eleanor continued, pushing forward the second stack. In perpetuity. You will not disclose, discuss, or allude to the terms of your marriage, your divorce, the financial affairs of June Sterling or the Sterling family, the internal operations of June Holdings, or the circumstances of your departure. This includes communications with media, in memoirs, in private conversation, or via any digital medium. The penalty for breach is liquidated damages of $50 million, plus injunctive relief, plus the immediate release of the third document to law enforcement. $50 million. A number that was once a line item, now an impossible phantom debt. He signed. The scratch of the pen was the only sound. And finally, Eleanor said, her voice dropping a fraction, the affidavit of confession. This document was thinner, deadlier. It was a plain, typed statement. No legalese. Just facts. His facts. Richard's eyes scanned the cold, clinical prose. I, Richard Alistair Thorne, being of sound mind, hereby confess and acknowledge the following. 1. Between the dates of January 2023 and February 2026, I knowingly and willfully diverted funds from June Holdings LLC and associated Sterling Family Trusts for my personal enrichment, using shell corporations including Nexus Consulting and Marlin Ventures. 2. I conspired with Samantha Lowell to conceal an extramarital affair and to misuse corporate resources. 3. I forged the signature of June Sterling on loan documents. 4. I provided false information to the board of directors of June Holdings regarding company performance. It went on. A bullet-pointed roadmap to a federal penitentiary. Every secret, every lie, laid bare in black and white. At the bottom, a space for his signature, and a line for a notary. A young associate stood silently in the corner, a notary stamp in hand. This document, Eleanor said, will be held in a secure, third-party escrow account. Its release is contingent solely upon a breach of the prior agreements, or upon a direct, written instruction from June Sterling. Do you understand? He understood. He was signing a sword to hang over his own neck, with the wire held by the woman he had betrayed. He signed. The notary stepped forward, stamped the document, and signed with a flourish. The click of the stamp was the sound of a cell door locking. Eleanor gathered the papers, placed them in a sealed envelope, and deposited it in a small, sleek safe behind her desk. She then handed Richard a manila envelope. It was thin. Inside you will find a passport in the name of David Rees, a debit card linked to a numbered account in Singapore with a balance of 100,000 US dollars, a key to a safety deposit box in the Bangkok airport containing $5,000 in local currency, and a one-way, first-class ticket on Thai Airways, Flight 795, departing SFO at 11:45 p.m. for Bangkok. A car is waiting downstairs. The driver will take you directly to the airport. You will not return to your vehicle. You will not attempt to access any personal belongings. Any items you have not taken with you are forfeit. Richard took the envelope. It weighed nothing. It was his entire life now. Is there anything you'd like to say? Eleanor asked. The question clearly a formality. He looked at her. At the city behind her. Tell her, he began. But the words died. What was there to tell her? I'm sorry was a joke. I hate you was a weakness. I'll miss you was the greatest lie of all. Tell her nothing. He finished. Eleanor gave a single, slight nod. The car is a black Lincoln Town car. License plate 7XVL292. It's at the private garage entrance on Stevenson Street. Goodbye, Richard. He was dismissed. He turned and walked out of the office, past the empty cubicles, into the elevator. The descent was weightless. A plunge into the underworld. The town car was there, idling. A driver in a black suit and cap stood by the open rear door. He didn't make eye contact. Richard slid inside. The door thudded shut, sealing him in leather-scented silence. The car pulled smoothly into the night. He didn't look back as the financial district receded. He opened the envelope. The passport was a good fake. His photo beside the name David Rees, born in Portland, Maine. The debit card was plain white with a string of numbers. The ticket was real. Bangkok. He knew no one there. He didn't speak the language. It was a black hole. The car merged onto the 101, heading south towards the airport. The lights of the city streamed by, a river of gold flowing in the opposite direction. He was leaving it all. The power, the prestige, the illusion. He felt nothing. He was a shell, being transported to a dumping ground. Then his phone buzzed. A text. From an unknown number. The deal has changed. Tell the driver to take the next exit. Head to the Golden Gate Bridge Welcome Center. South Lot. Come alone. Now. He stared at the screen. His heart giving a sick, Confused lurch. The deal had changed. What did that mean? Had she changed her mind? Was this another trap? A worse one? Stop the car, he said, his voice rough. The driver glanced in the mirror. Sir, take the next exit. Change of plan. Go to the Golden Gate Bridge. The South Welcome Center. The driver's eyes met his in the mirror, showing the first flicker of something other than robotic obedience, uncertainty. My instructions are to take you directly to SFO. Sir. No deviations. Your instructions just changed. Richard snapped. A ghost of his old authority in his tone. Check with your dispatcher. Now. The driver pulled over onto the shoulder. The car's tires crunching on gravel. He picked up a radio handset. Spoke in low tones. A crackled response came back. The driver listened. Then nodded. Confirmed. Proceeding to the Golden Gate Bridge. The car pulled back onto the freeway. Took the next exit. And began winding through the Presidio. The dark shapes of cypress trees looming against the night sky. Confusion and a sliver of mad hope warred in Richard's chest. Why the bridge? Of all places. It was where he'd proposed to her. A cliché. He'd thought at the time. But she'd loved it. The wind. The view. The sense of possibility. Was this some kind of twisted poetic justice? A final meeting at the beginning, the town car pulled into the nearly empty south parking lot. The bridge itself, lit in majestic amber glow, soared into the fog that was beginning to creep in from the ocean. The air was cold and damp, smelling of salt and diesel. Wait here, Richard told the driver. He got out, the manila envelope in his hand. The wind whipped at his suit jacket. He saw a lone figure standing at the railing at the far end of the lot, overlooking the black water of the bay. A woman, slim, erect, her coat collar turned up against the wind. June. He walked towards her, his shoes loud on the asphalt. As he got closer, he saw she wasn't looking at the water. She was looking at him. Her face was pale in the bridge's light, her expression unreadable. He stopped a few feet away. The roar of the wind and the distant hum of traffic on the bridge filled the space between them. Up close, he could see the strain around her eyes, the tightness of her mouth. The Ice Queen was gone. In her place was a woman holding onto her composure by a thread. You signed the papers, she said. It wasn't a question. You watched me do it. A faint, humorless twitch of her lips. The office has cameras. I wanted to see it. The final flourish. She turned to look at the water. Why did you propose here? The question. So personal. So unexpected. Through him. You know why. The view. The symbolism. Building a bridge together. It seemed grand. It was grand. She said softly. It was the grandest moment of my life. I believed you. I believed in the bridge. She turned her head. Her eyes meeting his. They were glittering. But not with tears. With something harder. But it was never a bridge. Richard. It was a drawbridge. And you were on the outside. Waiting to get in. And the moment you were across, you started burning it behind you. He had no defense. Why are we here? June. The papers are signed. The deal is done. I'm on my way to the airport. Why bring me here? Because the deal isn't done, she said, her voice gaining an edge. Signing a piece of paper in a lawyer's office is a transaction. It's not an end. I brought you here because this is where it started. And I need it to end here. I need you to look me in the eye and understand what you've lost. And I need to look you in the eye and know that I'm free of you. You've made your point, he said, bitterness rising. You've won. You've destroyed me. What more do you want? Blood, I want the truth, she said, taking a step closer. The wind tore at her hair. The whole truth. The papers have the financial truth. The legal truth. I want the human truth. Before you disappear forever. I want you to tell me. To my face. Why? Not the money. I know about the money. Why me? Was it just the access? Was I just the richest? Most gullible mark on your list? He stared at her. This formidable, broken woman demanding an answer he'd never honestly given himself. The easy lie was on his lips. Of course not. I loved you. But after the phone call, after the confession, Lies were worthless currency. At first, yes, he admitted. The words dragged from a deep, shameful place. You were the ultimate prize. The sterling name. The fortune. The challenge. Getting you was the final boss level of the game I was playing. He swallowed, the salt air harsh in his throat. But then, for a while, it wasn't. For a while, you were different. You were a relief. You were calm. You were steady. You didn't play the games everyone else played. I thought I could stop playing too. I thought I could just be Richard Sterling, and that would be enough. But it wasn't. She whispered. No. He said. The truth, a brutal catharsis. It was never enough. Being Richard Thorne wasn't enough. Being Richard Sterling, it was better. But it was still just a role. And the role came with rules. Your rules. Your family's rules. The silent judgments. The history I wasn't part of. The constant feeling that I was a guest in my own life. The money, it started as a way to build my own foundation. So I wouldn't feel like I was living in your house. So I could be my own man. It just escalated. It became a game again. A better, more dangerous game. And you became part of the board. A piece to be managed. She flinched as if struck. He'd finally said it. The unforgivable core of it. He hadn't just stolen from her, he had reduced her. And Samantha? She asked. Her voice barely audible over the wind. Was she a piece too? Or was she real? He laughed. A short, ugly sound. Samantha? She was a mirror. She reflected back exactly what I wanted to see. A man who was powerful, exciting, in control. She didn't care about rules or history. She just wanted the spoils. She was simple. You were complicated. You demanded something real. Samantha let me pretend. June absorbed this, turning back to the railing. Her knuckles white where she gripped the cold metal. So I was the complication. And my money was the solution. And she was the reward. She summed it up with devastating clarity. You're a very small man. Richard. In a very expensive suit. There was nothing to say. She was right. I brought you here for one more reason, she said, not looking at him. She reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a small, black electronic device. A digital voice recorder. She pressed a button. A red light glowed. The confession you signed is for the lawyers and the courts. This is for me. Say it again. Say everything you just said. For the record. My record. He stared at the recorder. Then at her face. A mask of grim determination. This was the true price. Not just exile, but the immortalization of his shame. His voice. On her device. Admitting his own pathetic, venal soul. Why? He breathed. Because when the ghost of you haunts me, she said, her eyes locking on his. When I wonder if I was a fool. If I dreamed the good parts. I will play this. And I will remember that the man I loved was a fiction. And the real you was this. A small, greedy boy who thought bridges were for burning. Now. Speak. And he did. With the wind howling and the great bridge soaring above them. He repeated it. The calculated pursuit. The fleeting moment of real affection crushed by his own insecurity. The transactional view of their marriage. The embezzlement as a game. Samantha as a simple, shiny distraction. He laid his soul bare. Not for leniency. But for her absolution. His voice, stripped of all charm, was flat, ugly, true. When he finished, she pressed the button. The red light died. She placed the recorder back in her pocket. It's over, she said. And for the first time, he believed she meant it. The war, the bitterness, the entanglement, it was done. He was just a problem that had been resolved. She turned to leave. June. He called out. The name torn from him. She paused, but didn't turn back. The 100,000, the passport, thank you. The gratitude was genuine. And it was the most humiliating thing he'd ever said. She glanced over her shoulder. Her profile etched against the bridge lights. Don't thank me. It's not mercy. It's housekeeping. Then she walked away. Her figure growing smaller and smaller until she disappeared into the shadows near the parking lot. Leaving him alone with the roar of the void. He stood there until the cold bit through to his bones. Then he turned and walked back to the waiting town car. The driver said nothing as he got in. The car pulled out, merging onto the highway, heading south once more, towards the airport, towards Bangkok, towards the empty life of David Rees. In the backseat, Richard Thorne finally closed his eyes. The final confrontation was over. He had looked into the abyss of his own making, and it had stared back, and found him wanting. There was no fight left, no rage, no hope, just the long, silent flight into an anonymous night. San Francisco. 3 months later, the ballroom of the Fairmorn Hotel was a galaxy of crystal, silver, and silk. The Future Founders Gala, the flagship fundraiser for the newly launched Sterling Chen Women's Venture Capital Fund, was the social event of the season. Every tech titan, venture capitalist, and society page fixture in Northern California seemed to be in attendance. The air buzzing with the low hum of money, influence, and genuine curiosity. At the center of this galaxy, standing at a modest podium, was June Sterling. She wore a gown of deep emerald green, simple in cut but exquisite in fabric, the color of new growth. Her hair was swept up, revealing the clean, strong lines of her neck and the simple diamond studs in her ears, her grandmother's. She looked, the society columnist for the Chronicle would later write, not like a woman who had recently endured a scandal, but like a queen who had quietly, decisively won a war. The soft chime of a spoon against crystal brought the room to a hush. 1,000 faces turned towards her. "Thank you," June began, her voice amplified yet intimate, carrying easily in the acoustically perfect room. "Thank you all for being here tonight, for believing in this fund, and more importantly, for believing in the extraordinary women it will empower." She paused. A practiced, comfortable silence. 3 months ago, the idea for this fund was just a note in the margin of a legal pad. It was born not from a place of triumph, but from a realization that the structures we often take for granted, partnerships, trusts, boards, can be fragile, that the keys to the kingdom can be misplaced, or stolen. A respectful, knowing murmur rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew the subtext. The fall of Richard Thorne had been the business scandal of the year, covered with salacious detail and sober financial analysis. The narrative had solidified, the brilliant, predatory outsider exposed and vanquished by the quiet, steely heiress who owned the kingdom all along. But fragility, June continued, her gaze sweeping the room, is not a weakness. It is a design specification. It tells us what needs reinforcement. This fund is not a charity. It is an architectural retrofit. It is about providing women with more than capital. It is about providing them with ownership, unassailable, legally fortified ownership of their ideas, their companies, and their destinies, so that their energy is spent on building, not on protecting their own foundations from those they let inside. The applause was immediate and sustained. It was the perfect sentiment, tough, smart, forward-looking, and wrapped in a socially conscious mission. It acknowledged the past without being defined by it. As she stepped away from the podium, the applause swelling, her eyes found Michael Chen in the crowd. He gave her a small, proud nod. Her partner in this, in everything now. Their relationship had evolved slowly, cautiously, from decades of friendship into something deeper, rooted in mutual respect and a shared understanding of the wreckage they had both navigated. He hadn't swooped in. He'd stood beside her. He'd run the company with a steady, ethical hand that had not only stabilized it but restored its reputation. The board had made his position permanent last month. She moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations with a genuine smile that reached her eyes more often than it had in years. She shook hands, exchanged air kisses, listened to pitches for the new fund. She was in her element, but it was a different element now. The power she wielded was no longer reflected light from the Sterling name, it was her own generation. A sleek young woman with a determined gleam in her eye, a founder of a promising quantum computing startup, cornered her. "Ms. Sterling, your story is so inspiring. To see you not just recover, but lead, it's what every woman in tech needs to see." June's smile remained warm, but a veil fell behind her eyes. Thank you. But the story isn't about me. It's about the fund. Tell me about your noise suppression problem. As she listened to the technical explanation, a part of her mind, a quiet chamber she seldom visited, replayed a different conversation. A voice on a windswept bridge. Small and greedy. You were the complication. And my money was the solution. The digital recorder was in her safe, next to the confession. She had never listened to it again. She didn't need to. The words were etched into her. Her inoculation against nostalgia. They were the fire that had burned away the last of the phantom limb pain. A waiter passed with champagne. She took a flute. The bubbles a faint tickle. Across the room, she saw Eleanor Vance, deep in conversation with a state senator. Eleanor caught her eye and raised her glass in a subtle salute. The legal fortress was holding. The non-disclosures were airtight. Richard Thorne had vanished as completely as a stone dropped in a deep lake. Her phone, a new, secure model, vibrated discreetly in her small clutch. A notification from Lionel Shaw. Not an alert, but a scheduled weekly report. She excused herself and stepped onto a quiet terrace overlooking the glittering city. The night air was cool. She opened the encrypted message. Subject, weekly surveillance digest, no change. Asset, subject remains in designated locale, Chiang Mai, Thailand. Low profile existence confirmed. Primary expenditure, rent, food, liquor. No attempts to contact previous networks. No financial activity outside of monitored account, balance, $42,117. No interaction with U.S. consular services. Health, stable. Psychological profile, consistent with resigned anonymity. No flags. Monitoring continues per protocol. Chiang Mai. She'd never been. She pictured humid air, noisy streets, the smell of street food and exhaust. A man named David Reese, drinking cheap whiskey in a rented room, watching the world move on without him. A ghost with a bank balance. The leash, as she told him, was not just the confession, but Lionel's silent, perpetual surveillance. She would always know where he was. He would never be free. And that, she had come to understand, was a more profound punishment than any prison. It was life as a museum exhibit of his own failure. She deleted the message. It was housekeeping. Maintenance on a concluded chapter. Everything all right? Michael's voice was soft beside her. He joined her at the railing. His presence a solid, comforting warmth. Just the usual updates, she said, leaning slightly into his shoulder. All quiet. He's not coming back. June, Michael said. Not as empty reassurance, but as a statement of operational fact. I know. And I'm not looking over my shoulder. She turned to face him. I'm looking forward. The Napa property closes next week. A genuine smile broke across his face. You're really selling the Broadway house. I already have. The new owners take possession in a month. A nice family from Seattle. Tech. They have 2 young children. The place needs the noise. The decision had been surprisingly easy. The mansion was a beautiful shell. A stage set for a play that had ended in tragedy. She'd donated half the art to museums, kept a few pieces that spoke to her, and was letting the rest go with the house. Her parents' portraits were in storage. She wasn't ready for them, but she no longer felt obligated to live in their museum. And the Valley House? Michael asked, referring to the modern, glass and steel estate in Napa she'd bought with her own proceeds. Designed by a brilliant female architect. It's waiting. It's all light and open space. No shadows. She took his hand. I was thinking, the first board retreat for the fund could be held there. A working weekend. Less stifling than a hotel. That's a great idea, he said, lacing his fingers with hers. A fresh start. In every way. They stood in companionable silence, looking at the city. Her city. Not by inheritance, but by conquest. She had taken it back. Later, as the gala wound down, a reporter from a major financial network managed to get a moment with her. The camera light was harsh. Ms. Sterling. An incredible night. The fund is a runaway success. But people are still fascinated by the personal journey. What's the one thing you want people to take away from the story of the last few months? June looked directly into the camera. Her gaze clear and unwavering. That resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, brick by brick. Sometimes with the very stones that were thrown at you. And that the most important fortress you'll ever build is the one around your own sense of self. Protect that. At all costs. The reporter, sensing there would be no salacious details, no tears, nodded professionally. A powerful message. Thank you, Ms. Sterling. Back in her penthouse apartment, a temporary, sleek space in a new building downtown. Chosen for its security and its lack of history, June finally kicked off her heels. The silence was different here. It was a choice. It was peaceful. On the sleek console, a single, physical letter waited. It had been forwarded by Eleanor. The return address was a federal correctional institution in Central California. She knew what it was before she opened it. She used a silver letter opener. It was from Samantha Lowell. Her plea bargain had been finalized. 18 months for her minor role in the fraud and for accepting stolen property. In exchange for testimony that was no longer needed. The letter was short. Scrawled on prison stationery. June, I know I have no right to write. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say, from this lovely concrete box, that I'm sorry. Not for him. For my part in it. I was stupid and greedy and I thought I was playing a game. I didn't see the real people getting hurt. You didn't have to give the DA what you had on me. But you did. I guess that's the difference between you and him. You follow through. I hope your new fund does well. S.L. June read it twice. Then fed it into the crosscut shredder beside the desk. The apology was not accepted. But it was noted. Another loose end. Tied. Samantha's fate was her own. June felt nothing for her. Pity was a luxury for those who hadn't been in the trenches. She walked to the wall of windows. Down below. The city pulsed with light and life. She thought of the Napa house. Of the fund. Of Michael. Of the quiet, unshakable authority she now carried within her. They had all underestimated her. Richard. The board. The society pages. Even, for a time, herself. They had seen the heiress. The wife. The victim. They had thought breaking her would be like breaking a piece of fine old china, a tragic shattering. But they were wrong. She was not china. She was the kill. And the fire that had been meant to consume her had, instead, forged something entirely new. Something tempered, unbreakable, and utterly her own. A phoenix. Not from ashes, but from purified ore. And her flight, she knew, was just beginning.